I'm glad somebody came. A week from today is the midterm, the first exam, and I'm sure you have questions about that. Jasmine probably has fewer questions. The exam will be 30 multiple choice questions. It'll be online. You'll go to the quizzes and find the quiz. Once you start it, you'll have an hour to do it. I actually give you a little more time than that. You can choose any time between midnight Tuesday through midnight Wednesday to take the exam. So you have a 24-hour period. The exam will cover everything. Let me see if I can pull that up. It will cover everything on the course outline through week 4. So that includes 4 topics, and we'll talk about them in more detail. The first 4 topics, what is economics and the economic way of thinking? The second one is supply and demand and applications. The third one is alternative ways of solving the economic problem. And the fourth one is the role of money and the financial system. At least that's an introduction to that. In terms of the modules, that includes 5 modules. The first 2 on economic thinking and choice in a world of scarcity. Those are the introductory modules. Then 2 modules on supply and demand and applications of supply and demand. And then finally, the module on money and banking. Strictly speaking, it's only the first 3 sections, but there are only 4 sections in the module. So if you wanted to use the module quizzes to practice, I would just read the 4th section. It's not that long, and then take the module quiz for that. That is assuming that you have module quizzes. Everybody has self-checks. You can do all the self-checks. You can do them as many times as you want, and that's a good way to learn the material. You should also read. There were three outside readings that are on the course outline. One is the chapter in the Haberner book. One is Radford's The Economics of a POW Camp, and one is the Spectre article that we did our online discussion about involving Delhi dollars. Okay. Any questions about what I've said so far before I get into the details?
I don't think so. I don't have any.
Okay. The test has 3 basic kinds of questions. The first questions are sort of definitions. Show me that you know what opportunity cost means. The second are applications, kind of straightforward applications of the concepts. So those are a little more challenging because they make you use the concepts, not just know what the definitions are. And the third one are problems that you have to work through. These are the example of this, which is hello, Mariana. The example of this, which is on this exam, is there is a big supply and demand scenario where I give you a market and something happens and you need to figure out which curve shifts and what happens to the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. And then something happens that causes the other curve to shift. And so you have to figure out what happens to equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. And then we put them together and you have to figure out the overall impacts on equilibrium price and quantity.
So was it basically like homework 3?
Just like homework 3, but a different scenario or a different set of scenarios. Okay, so if you did okay on homework 3, you're great. Okay. Okay, so Mariana, I don't know if you heard this, but the exam covers the first 4 topics on the course outline, and that's 5 modules. The exam itself is 30 multiple choice questions. Most people take about a minute a question, so it means that you should be able to complete the exam in about a half hour. I give you an hour, actually a little more than that. So hopefully time won't be an issue for you.
What time does it open
Okay.
On Friday.
Great question. Hey, Abby.
Hi. Sorry, I'm in the car, but I thought I'd still catch up.
Are you driving?
No, I am smart. I'm not driving.
Good, good, good.
It's hands-free.
You got your wish, Abby.
What is it? I'm with Morgan.
Hey, Morgan. Is Morgan driving?
No, I meant my wish. Am I with
Yes,
Morgan?
exactly. So you'll be
Thank
hearing
you.
more about that. Okay. Okay. So, where are you going somewhere fun, at least?
Yeah, I'm going to Soup and Taco for dinner.
Awesome.
I was just there. Oh, yum. I'll tweet you a picture, Dr. Greenlaw.
Okay, Aaron.
Hi.
Hey, Aaron.
I just gotta practice.
Okay. Can you practice and listen to the Hangout at the same time?
I'm sitting on a bench, so I'm good.
Okay, okay. I talked a little bit about the layout of the exam. It's multiple choice, 30 questions, pretty straightforward. It covers the first 4 topics, and that's 5 modules. You can see all that information in the course outline. So now what I wanted to do is go into the 4 topics and sort of identify the things that I think are important, so that you should know. The first part of the first topic was sort of what is economics and what is the economic problem. So you should know how to define those things. The concept of scarcity is really important. Then we talked about scarcity is the result of both nature and human nature. The nature part is that the resources that we have access to are limited, finite at any point in time. Combine that with the fact that human nature has virtually unlimited wants, and you run into the problem that we face. We talked about the difference between economic goods and free goods. Most goods are economic goods. That just means they're scarce. And that was that. That was the first part of the first topic. The second part of the first topic was, where are we? There we go. This was about the economic way of thinking. We talked about what is a liberal education, and is economics a science? We had that interesting discussion. At least I thought it was pretty interesting. And so you should know the arguments there. Then we talked about how economists make the distinction between positive and normative reasoning. Positive reasoning is factual. It can be tested scientifically, and it's not based on value judgments. Normative reasoning is conclusions drawn from value judgments. So you can't really test normative reasoning. Okay, it's just an opinion. So you can expect that on the exam I would give you some statements and say, are these positive or negative, or positive or normative? Or, identify the positive statement from these, or that sort of thing. Okay, so you need to be able to differentiate between those two things. Then we talked about theories and models. Theories and models are probably the main tool that economists use to analyze issues and problems. We talked about consumer budget constraints as an example of opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is really important. You should definitely know that one. We talked about production possibility frontiers or curves as another way to illustrate opportunity cost. And that was the end of topic 1 in a nutshell. Okay, supply and demand. Supply and demand, we covered a lot of ground. We looked at what are the key factors that affect demand and what are the key factors that affect supply. And we observed that price is common to both of those lists. Price is what shows up on the vertical axis of the demand curve and the supply curve. A change in the price causes a movement along the curve. A change in anything else causes the curve to shift. It's really important that you can differentiate between moving along a fixed curve and shifting the curve. We talked about the first rule of consumer behavior. It says a consumer won't pay more for something than the satisfaction that it gives them. We talked about the law of demand. We did basically the same stuff for supply. And then we put supply and demand together to look at sort of the mechanics of markets and equilibrium. What we said is if we are not in equilibrium, the economic forces tend to push us there. And market equilibrium occurs where supply equals demand. And then we did some various exercises about how you analyze markets when there are shocks. Basically, what you do is you say, is the shock occurring in the demand list? If so, that shifts the demand curve. Is it occurring in the supply list? If so, it shifts the supply curve. And then you just work through the problem and try to figure out what happens to the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity. Okay. In module 4 on applications, there was a discussion of price floors and price ceilings. Price floors are legal minimum prices. Price ceilings are legal maximum prices. One thing to be aware of is sometimes they don't have any impact. If the legal minimum price is 0, right, that's not going to have an impact because it's so low it doesn't matter. If the legal maximum price is infinity or something, it's not going to have an impact either. Those kind of situations are not very interesting because there's nothing going on. Okay, what we really care about is binding price floors and binding price ceilings, which means when the price floor or price ceiling has an impact on the situation in the market. Let's see. That, I think, in a nutshell, was topic 2 on supply and demand. Then we went on and we kind of took a little bit of a segue out of the book and looked at alternative ways of addressing the economic problem. Hopefully, I pointed out, and I'm going to remind you now, that this material is covered fairly briefly in the first section of the supply and demand module. The Halberner article goes into much more detail, so I encourage you to read the Halberner article because you'll get a lot more out of that. So we talked about traditional economies and command economies and market economies, and in the real world, oftentimes they are combinations of those things, which we call mixed economies. Let's see. Somebody. Morgan, you're here. Morgan. Morgan. Morgan, are you listening or are you just pretending to be here? Okay. All right. Then the most recent stuff that we did was we talked about what money is and how banks work, kind of bare bones, and why money is important in the economic system. The short part of the short version of the story is that money makes it. We know that markets create efficiency because what markets do is they move goods and services from people that value them less to people that value them more. And that improves the efficiency in an economy, okay? What we then we can kind of add on that by saying there are two kinds of markets. There are barter markets and there are money markets. That is, there are markets where the exchange takes place through barter, trading goods for goods. There are markets where the exchange takes place by trading money for goods or goods for money. Money makes markets work more efficiently. So that makes the world even better when you have money. We could have talked about the role of credit and finance for businesses. We know that businesses need capital to produce their product. And by that, I don't mean money. What I mean is they need tools and equipment and the factory and the office building and all of those other things, the retail sales location, right? Oftentimes, the firm doesn't have the cash to be able to buy those things outright, and so it needs to borrow the money in order to do that. So credit literally helps businesses operate at a higher level than they would be able to do without having access to credit. Okay, so credit is really important as well. Okay, and then the last part of that module, I think it was the last part of that module, the last part that we're going to do says, it turns out that the availability of money and credit is really important. The more available money and credit are, the more spending takes place in an economy, and the more GDP gets produced. The more jobs, the more output, right? So being able to identify how much money there is actually in circulation is pretty important. So the government uses several different definitions of the money supply. The most basic definition is called M1 for first definition of the money supply. N1 is basically currency plus checking account balances, okay? Some economists say, hey, there are other assets that are very, very liquid that for all intents and purposes ought to be counted as money too. And so they've come up with a slightly broader definition of money, which they call M2. M2 is M1 plus things like savings account balances that are easily accessible, especially in this world of ATM cards. Also small denomination time deposits. Small, I always put in quotes because in the world of finance, small means no more than $100,000. I would consider that to be a pretty big time deposit myself. Time deposits are like certificates of deposit, where you give the bank your money for a defined period of time. Basically, you're saying, I'm not going to try to get this money out for 90 days or 180 days or even maybe a year. The advantage of that is when you have a time deposit, when you give the bank your money for that specific period of time, the bank will pay you a higher rate of interest, okay? And then the final component of M2 is either money market fund balances or money market account balances. They're basically the same thing. A money market fund is operated by an investment company. A money market account is operated by a bank, but they operate pretty much the same way. These are essentially checking account balances that pay market interest rates, unlike bank accounts, which don't tend to pay market interest rates. So if interest rates get high, money market funds and money market accounts are a really good deal, because then, if you keep your money just in a bank account, a regular bank account, you're really going to be at a disadvantage. You're not going to earn near the interest rate that you could. Okay. All right. I think that is the quick explanation of what we've done so far this semester. So I guess the next thing to say is, what questions do you have?
Are there going to be a lot of graphs?
I would say no. You don't have to draw any graphs at all. But when you're doing like the supply and demand problems, if it were me, I would draw graphs in the margins so that I could figure out what was going on. But you don't have to draw graphs anytime.
Are most of the problems going to be like, or questions, because you said it's all multiple choice, right?
Yes.
It's going to be mostly like situational questions?
Well, some of them are just straight definitions.
Okay.
You know, which of the following is the best definition of opportunity cost or something like that?
Wait, Dr. Greenlaw, I have a question before my phone dies. That's why there's no video, because it's like on 1%.
That's fine.
So we only had, it's 30 minutes, right, for 30 questions?
You have 60 minutes.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, so you should have plenty of time.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I'm sorry if my phone dies. I'm not hanging up on you.
That's okay. You should watch the beginning of the video because it explains sort of the details about the exam. You can do it anytime in a 24-hour period from midnight next Tuesday to midnight next Wednesday.
Awesome. I'll go rewatch it. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Other questions? Morgan, you're quiet tonight.
I am. I'm very tired. Sorry.
Okay.
I don't have any other questions. You answered all mine last time.
Good, good.
Abby and I have been studying, so I think we should be fine.
I hope so.
Me too.
Anybody else?
Are the quiz questions like similar to what's going to be on the test?
Yes, but I think the test questions are clearer. Sometimes the quizzes are a little ambiguous.
Yeah.
Another thing is that some of the quiz questions are multiple select, where you're supposed to identify all the right answers. And the exam is only multiple choice, so there's one right answer to each question. Other questions? What time is practice?
Mine?
1?
No, I said mine. We had
Yeah.
It was 3:30 to 6.
No. Yeah, no. What time is practice?
It typically starts at 4, but I had to go like to the trainers afterwards, and I also had to talk to my coach.
Oh, so you sort of missed it, but you're going to make it up or something?
I'm sorry.
So you sort of missed it, but you're going to make it up, or are you coming back?
Oh no, we started at 4, and then like we ended at 6.
Okay.
So I'm good right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just insanely tired and insanely sweaty, and I feel gross and disgusting.
Well, if it's any consolation, we can't see that on the video.
It was like insanely hard.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Actually, a question that's not really related to the test. Do the final scores of the quizzes, do that count toward the final grade?
Yes, but very little.
Oh, okay.
Okay. It's mostly just an incentive for you to do them. The purpose of the quizzes really is to give you feedback.
Okay, cool.
And then
Go on.
I have one question.
Sure.
When you're talking about like the quizzes, are you talking about the ones in the modules?
Yes.
Or am I just being stupid?
Well,
okay.
If you have end of module quizzes, those count. The self checks don't count, but the module quizzes count, but only a little bit. So don't worry about it.
If you don't have the module quizzes, then what makes up that small amount of points?
What you'll see if you were, say, if Morgan and Abby compared their final grade calculations that are explained in Canvas, what you'd see is the point. There are more homework points for the students that have the end of module quizzes, and that's the difference right there.
Oh, so like the points are just divided up in different places, you're saying?
Correct. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Mine would be elsewhere.
Yep.
All right. I was like scared.
Oh, don't be. You know, I mean, I understand the first exam is hard because you don't know what it's going to look like. That's why we have 3 exams in the course. And you know, by the last one, you'll have a really good idea. You should have a really good idea after this one, actually. Okay. So as you study for the exam, don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have questions, if there are things you don't understand. You know, worst case, we can even set up a little personal Google Hangout and I can walk you through things.
Okay.
Sounds good.
So you're a martial artist too, huh?
Me?
Yeah.
It was like stopped like 2 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, 13 years is a long time for that.
Yep. All right.
I really should change that picture.
Yeah. If nobody has any more questions, I will let you go. And you know, don't hesitate to reach out to me if something comes up and there's something you don't understand. I'm happy to talk to you. All right.
Thank you.
Sure. See you later.
Thank you.